So here I am back in 2.83.12 using yesterday's Boxcutter. And so the next thing I want to discuss is repeat. So if I were to say draw a box shape and place it, the next thing I could do is hold control and double click and I can repeat this shape. And repeat is pretty easy in terms of putting like little micro detail. You can just control click and double click and it's just really fun to repeat things. However, repeating things with precision can always become a little bit of a struggle. So let's go ahead and make a new file, and keep in mind that I'm using the previous version of Boxcutter. And one thing I want to show is how I would draw this shape with Ngon and then I would just repeat it using Shift to Live. Notice that I'm having to draw this off of the mesh because it's always been hard to orient this vert with this vert. So that's just life, you know, but I've always hated that. So we'll just shift it to live. And I don't even need it live. I can just go back to, I can press 1, get rid of that. And we'll just press D, switch over to box, and I'm just going to Control Shift double click. And now I can repeat this shape. And now I can Control Shift double click and repeat this shape. And it's kind of a game of wits whenever you're playing with repeat in this fashion, but it allows you to get these really interesting step shapes. And what I'll do is, forget about that. We'll come back and grab this area, extract it with Y, and now we have this really interesting layered cutter that we can bring in at like a more variable depth. And I'll like use this to detail the side of crates and stuff like that, just to really stack up some quick detail. I'll work a cube and then just transfer it to something else. But notice the process that I use with repeat. Another thing I want to show with repeat is that if we were to turn on snapping and we activate snapping dots, whenever we use snap dots will just break down repeat. So let's draw this shape again. There's our shape, and we want to repeat it on this dot. That's just not going to happen. Keep in mind that we can repeat it on the surface just by control double clicking. We can just repeat it on the surface, but I've always hated how it never worked with dots, and this was something that was always a bit of a nuisance and one of my least favorite support issues, because it meant having to admit defeat that the system's just incomplete, and it's just not any better at this moment. It's just incomplete. However, today that changes. So here we are back in 717.17, and I just want to show how repeat has changed. So we'll just draw a box, and there we are, just drawing our quick wedge box. And I'm just going to control double click and we'll repeat it again. And you probably are thinking, you know, that looks a lot like the last repeat. Well, let's take a moment and talk about repeat lock or release lock. Release lock is a breakdown of all the behaviors that we have inside of Boxcutter. Normally you draw a shape, and then when you release your mouse, you're able to extrude. However, we took some steps towards dissecting that and allowing you to turn on release lock in order to turn this into a stepped process. So now you can draw the shape, pause, rotate around, get reflective with it, and then finally grab the dot and begin transitioning into the next step. And this can be handy for users of varying accessibility types. However, the interesting thing about repeat lock is shift clicking it brings up a sub panel, and new to this version we've added something called repeat lock. And this was actually the formal request, was actually to add the ability to use repeat lock, but it expanded into so much more because repeat was simply a system that was incomplete. So now if we control double click, we see that the shape has been placed. We can press G and grab it. We can move it around. We can do it again. We could control double click to just place this shape. G, grab it, move it around. And this just unlocks the ability to use repeat in a way that we never could before. And at this time, you probably noticed that I've just been avoiding the dots, and truth be told, I'm not. So let's press Alt X to put a mirror modifier on this and split this in between. And now we have a line going down the middle. So if I were to control double click, this is now placed precisely on that line. However, you don't see the boolean because the hotline is being exposed. If we were to press Z, we can see that this boolean is sitting precisely on this area, which is why another task in design is the ability to switch between fast and exact on the fly, but that's not what we're talking about here today. Depending on your draw type, you can actually utilize these dots in very creative ways. Because I drew this as a corner drawn shape, it's just not going to work out when being repeated in the middle of an edge that's happening right here. So if we were to draw the shape but hold Alt, we're just drawing the shape. And now when we repeat it, it's actually a center drawn shape. We could press Z to do a wire see-through. And just like that, we're able to easily repeat this shape without any issue or unpredictability, allowing us to do all sorts of things. The original test was going to show how you can repeat this very predictably on every face of a cube, just over and over and over, even by subdividing. So I might as well show that example. We'll press X, delete, we'll press X, delete it, and we'll just bring in a cube. So I'm just going to subdivide this a couple of times, and you'll see why. And it's because snap dots orients to this. However, that's another point of examination that I plan to get into at some point in the future. That system also remains incomplete. What we have right now is cursory, but I definitely want something to finish the job. And we're definitely going to be getting there, as you'll be seeing as we go on with this video. So I'm just drawing an area and just extracting it with Y by drawing a box around it. And we have all these snap points. So I'm just going to draw from here, but I'm going to press period because I could hold Alt or Shift, or I could just press period, and that will allow me to center draw. And we just bring this shape out. And that's our shape. And now we can just go through and repeat this. And that's all there is to it. However, one of the things that you might notice is that repeat lock is kind of getting in the way. Really, I don't need repeat lock because I'm actually confident that it's going to repeat exactly as I want. So here we are, just going through, stacking these over and over. I have some sort of twitch that's making me continually deselect objects. I don't know what's happening. All this cold weather, I guess. So we continue on just repeating this, and you can see that, you know, this video isn't a long take. I'm not even, you know, doing pauses in between these sections to break them down because I've tested this over and over. However, here I've broken a rule, so now I'm stuck on the other side. It looks like about 6 cuts ago, I grabbed one of the wrong dots that was created by a subdivision instead of sticking with the ones that are actually created on the cube by my initial subdivisions. So in the future, we plan to be coming back and revising grid as well, but I just want to show how repeat can now be used in a very predictable manner. And this is just the start of our repeat system and its improvements. So without further ado, let's move on to the next part. In addition to the things I talked about previously with our face dot support with repeat, we'll just draw a custom shape of a Boxcutter logo. Go figure. We'll press VV in order to make this a radial array. Just roll it around a couple of times and we'll just click to apply. And for this, I will shift click and turn on repeat lock through the release lock panel. And just by grabbing this face dot, we can actually place this here. And notice that while we repeated this radial array, we also repeated it in a live state, which means that we can grab this displacement dot and still move this out in a radial fashion in the middle of this cut, even though we're in the middle of basically a repeat of the last cut. So we can even grab this dot and adjust the scale, change the scale of our logo, and of course to click and apply to complete it. So we'll do the same thing here. Control double click and we see that we've actually repeated the last cut that we had when we manipulated it here, which is something that I don't want. I'll hold shift and get it back to something more square. And we can even adjust the radial distance, maybe even bring it a little bit closer. And from here, let's control double click and repeat it on the next face. And we can select the object, control double click, and grab the displacement dot to move it around. One of the things I plan to revisit is resume, which is where you grab the dot and it doesn't actually jump to a neutralized position. It stays in the current position before you begin dragging. There's always more work to be done. So by clicking and applying, I believe you guys get the idea when it comes to getting in here and playing with radial array and even repeating it and having it live on the fly. And I could even get in here and press V in order to re-array it, you know, in case you're wondering, and set that up once again and get in and adjust it. Press Control D to bring up my settings, and we can go in the behavior panel and specifically set array to the amount that we want, even on a repeat. Let's press Shift A, add a cube, move it over to the side, and we'll just Control double click to repeat this. Press Control D and adjust the count on the fly. So even if there isn't a fluid option available, there's always an option available for you to get the option that you want. or at least that's what we aim for. So by pressing Control D, we can get in here, add more segments if needed, grab our displacement dot to make this something wider, and from here we've actually destroyed our top dot, which would normally show up. But always hack the dots by just subdividing geometry, because I know if there's a vert, a dot's going to be there. And so even though this object has things penetrating into it, making it an n-gon face, causing irregular dot fashions to show up, we can still Control double click and repeat this shape just as we would normally. N-gon also has repeat capabilities, so here I am rotating the shape and just holding Alt to snap it to front, and we'll press D, switch to N-gon, and we'll just begin drawing a shape, and we will just repeat by Control double clicking. Even while we're in N-gon, we can still have repeat lock on and Control double click and just repeat this shape just as we would in Box. So now you can repeat with a little more confidence than you could previously. I always have to admit that repeat previously felt a little random inside of Boxcutter, and that was something that I always meant to double back for and make feel a little bit more sane. So here I am extracting the same area, where I can then redraw it with a little bit less depth differential to create a really interesting shape. But you get the idea. So for this example, I have a subdivided cube, as you can see here, and all this geometry is still alive since I'm still able to go through and scroll through to booleans. So what I'll do is first draw a box around it, press W once to get out of wedge box, and we'll just cut through it. Press Y in order to perform an extraction, and now we've extracted it. Currently I have repeat lock on, as you can see here. By shift clicking the release lock button, we're able to bring up this little sub panel, and now that I have this, I'm able to hold Control and we'll just draw from this one, but I'll press period in order to draw this shape out using the center draw. And we'll just pull this out, hold shift to get it proportional, and we'll just tab to live to hold it here. So while I can press R and rotate this if I needed to, I'm just going to, for the sake of this example, just click and apply. So now if I were to double click, it repeats exactly as it was oriented the moment I drew it previously. But let's take this and actually rotate it 90 degrees and click and apply. So now the next time that I repeat this, it will repeat exactly as I oriented it previously. And this will continue, as I double click these points. So just letting you know that improvements have been had with the way that rotation is taken into consideration, even between the repeat process. So on this last row, we'll just double click here. We'll rotate this 90 and maybe even offset a little bit and just click in place. And we'll just double click, and we're still able to repeat this exactly as we drew it. Of course, offset isn't yet taken into consideration, and the standard argument for this is why not just use an array, which of course you can just pause it, press V and activate array, and move your mouse in order to adjust the amount of array, pressing Shift R to completely reset it if things get off screen. And just like that, you can quickly clone an object. But just letting you know that repeat is now stronger than ever, where even if you have something set up like this where you arrayed it previously, you can go back in and repeat it with the array on it, just like you see. And we'll select this, locate a dot, and we'll repeat here, press V in order to adjust the array. And notice that because of the non-destructive behavior, that it's now able to keep that array live even when I'm repeating it. So I can just click and apply this, jump over to the next face, and here I am with the same repeat, same array, same shape. I can press V, adjust it. Resume will be something that I plan to deal with in future releases. However, it is something that isn't far from my mind. So now we'll just grab another point and just repeat this, and so forth. And just like that, you can see how repeat has been strengthened in this particular release.